Hello grade 8, this is Miss Mary. This is the third video for the fourth quarter about chemical bonds. So let's start. In this video we will speak about the three types of bonds in this lesson. Atoms combine with each other forming molecules. If you remember the last video you said that atoms they combine together or they come together to form compounds or molecules. And this connection or interaction between atoms, we call it chemical bonds. How many kinds of chemical bonds? We have three main types of bonds: ionic bonds, covalent bonds, and metallic bond. In this video we will speak only about the ionic bonds. Okay, so let's start. In the ionic bonds, it's a bond resulting from the electric attraction between metal atom positive ion and the non-metal negative ion. In the previous video we said that metals all the time they lose electrons because they have few electrons in their outermost level, and that's why they form positive ions. And the non-metals they have more than 4 electrons in their outer shell, and that's why they have to gain electrons, and when they gain electrons they change to negative ions. Positive and negative, they have attraction, like magnet. North pole and south pole, they are attracted together. This is also the same way in the ionic bond. The positive ion of metal attracted to the negative ions of the non-metal, and this attraction is called ionic bond. So the ionic bond results from attraction between different charges, positive and negative. Let's see example forming positive ion, how positive ion is formed. Here we have the sodium atom, Na. Sodium atom has 11 protons and 11 electrons. This is a neutral form of sodium. So the overall charge for sodium is 0 because 11 protons cancel the 11 electrons. So the overall charge is 0. Okay? When the atom of sodium loses this electron, it has now 11 protons, as we see here, and how many electrons? 10 electrons. And in this case, sodium is very stable because the outer shell here will have 8 electrons, and this will make the sodium to be stable. So in this case, we have 11 protons and 10 electrons, and we have more extra proton, and this gives the overall charge of the sodium positive 1, or it has 1 positive protons. So the sodium here we write it Na and 1 plus here, because number 1 we don't write 1, just sign for a plus sign or positive sign, that's it. So Na positive 1. Okay, let's see another example also for positive ions like aluminum, Al, and this is a neutral form. Aluminum has 13 protons and 13 electrons. The atomic number of aluminum is 13, so it has 13 protons positive and 13 electrons, and in this case they cancel each other, so the overall charge for the aluminum neutral atom is 0. What will happen when the aluminum loses 3 electrons in the outer shell? Look here, this is 1, 2, 3. In this case, aluminum will lose 3 electrons in the third energy level. And will it change to this atom, and this aluminum ion is very stable because it has 2 electrons in the inner shell and 8 electrons in the outer shell, and in this case the aluminum is stable because the outer level is completed. But in this case, how many? We have 13 protons and we have 10 electrons only. So 13 plus and 10 minus, when you subtract them, we have the overall charge will be 3 plus. So the aluminum, we write it like this, the ion Al3 plus, or means that the aluminum has overall charge positive 3. Okay? So metals, they form positive ions. The positive ions, they can have 1 positive or 3 or 2. It depends on the kind of element. Energy needed to lose electrons. Atoms to lose electrons, they need to take energy instead of it, like money. when you go to buy something, you have to pay money. So atoms, when they go to take electrons from another atoms, they have to give it energy, like money. So energy is needed to pull electrons away from atoms. So to take electrons away from atoms, they need to get energy instead of these electrons. Only small amount of energy is needed to take electrons from metal atoms. If you remember, we said like for sodium, for example, sodium, it has only one electron in the outer shell. Sodium atom doesn't need a lot of energy to lose this electron. They just need little amount of energy to lose this electron. So group 1 and 2, they need small amount of energy to lose these electrons, as we said, because these groups, they react very easily. So the energy needed to take electrons from metals comes from the formation of negative ions. Okay, so the energy they needed, they take it from the negative ions. That comes from negative ions. Here, how it works, how forming the negative ions. In this example, we have the oxygen atom. We have here the oxygen atom. The oxygen atom has 8 protons, the atomic number 8, and it has 8 electrons. So here, this is neutral. The overall charge is 0. Here, the outer shell has 6 electrons, or 6, the valency electrons are 6. So here the outer shell needs 2 electrons to complete the outer shell. So the oxygen atom gain 2 electrons from another atom to form oxide ion. So now we have 8 protons, like they are in the atom inside. And now how many electrons do we have? We have 10 electrons. So the overall charge will be, which one is more? Electrons by 2 more electrons. So the overall charge minus 2. This is oxide ion. Let's move to the chlorine atom. The chlorine Cl has 17 protons and 17 electrons. This is the neutral one. It has 0 charge. Here we have 7 valence electron in the outer shell. So the chlorine atoms needs one electron to complete the outer shell, and that's why they gain 1 electron, and now they will have 17 protons and 18 electrons, and the overall charge will have 1 more electron, so it will be -1. So also we write negative like here, minus, and we don't write 1. Okay, so here we have the oxide ion, O2 minus here. This is the charge of the oxide ion, and energy of gaining electron. If you remember, we said in the metals or the positive ions, they need to gain energy to lose their electron. But here the opposite. Atoms, to gain electrons, they give off energy. So energy is given off by most non-metal atom when they gain electrons. The more easily an atom gains an electron, the more energy the atom releases. Atom of group 17 give off the most energy when they gain an electron. Group 17, they give most of energy to gain 1 electron. These elements are very reactive. And usually ionic bonds form between metals and non-metals. So non-metal release energy, and metals, they gain the energy. So in this group, atoms at which group on the periodic table give off the most energy? As we said, group 17, and this group 17, like chlorine, like bromine, iodine, they are called halogens. Okay, so we will learn about the ionic bond between sodium ion and chlorine ion. A strong ionic bond is formed due to the electric attraction, as we said, between the positive charge and the negative charge. We said positive and negative, they attract. So the ionic bond, very strong between sodium ion, positive ion, and negative ion. They have attraction between them, they form ionic bond, and they form the sodium chloride, the table salt. Okay, so now we know how sodium chloride formed. By formation of the sodium ion and the chlorine ion, they form together to form sodium chloride. Ionic compounds. When ionic bonds form, the number of electrons lost by metal atoms equal the number gained by non-metal. Like, for example, if one atom will lose one electron, the other atom will gain one electron, okay, in a compound. So the two, they are the same. Compound formed is neutral because the charges of ions cancel each other. Like, for example, sodium has 1, chlorine has positive 1, sodium has positive 1, chlorine has negative 1, so when they come together, they cancel each other, and the compound now is neutral. When ions bond, they form a repeating three-dimensional shape or pattern called crystal lattice. Like the one shown in the picture, most ionic compounds, they form crystal shapes like this, tiny crystals. And in this shape they are repeating in regular pattern. This is called the crystal lattice. Okay, the strong attraction between ions in crystal lattice give ionic compounds certain properties, which includes brittleness, high melting point, and high boiling point. Because they are very strong attracted to each other, it's very hard to melt salt. The boiling point and melting point for salt is very high. Salt melts at 800 degrees. So because they have very strong attraction between the atoms here, they are very strong. The bond here is very strong, so it's very hard to separate them. So the salt melts at high temperature and also boils at high temperature because of strong bond between ions. And that's why also they are brittle, or means when you press on them with high pressure, they break down to smaller, very smaller pieces, or they shatter to smaller pieces. So the properties of ionic compounds like table salt, they have high melting point, high boiling point, and they are brittle. What is a crystal lattice? It's like a three-dimensional repeating pattern. Okay. Okay, grade 8, this was everything for today, and see you in another video to explain the covalent bonds and the metallic bond. See you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye bye.